Okay, just make sure. Are we live? Mm, all right, there we go. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and happy Wednesday to each and every one of you. I wanted to do this specific stream yesterday already because, well, that's when I wanted to stream. I'm glad I didn't, though, because ultimately Truth Report asked me to be on their live stream. So I was there yesterday. And I'm actually super glad that I didn't because obviously we got Brain Bozell, who spoke at length about some of the things that America really doesn't seem to like about South Africa at the moment. So I also understand that I started a little bit early. Normally I wait until 12 o'clock, but as I sat down, I went to go grab some coffee. And as I came back to my studio and I sat down, I started reading the conversation that News Gallows and Francha, how you guys doing, by the way, the conversation that you guys have been having in chat. And I just immediately wanted to be a part of this conversation because it is an interesting conversation. The question, Francois, that you asked me in terms of the five requirements that the government of the United States have placed to the South African government, how would I rate those in terms of importance and what I think the United States values most? I would argue that in terms of, okay, so let's start with what I think is a lesser important sort of ask, but one that is used as justification for something that is really important. That would be the classification of Sing the Boer, Kill the Boer, Kill the Farmer, the song that Julius Malema sings, Kill the Boer, Kill the Farmer, that being classified as a racist song and also not part of free speech. I think it is less important, but at the same time, I think that sort of qualifies the refugee thing that the Americans are clearly interested in. And the reason I know for a fact that that is an important thing for the Americans and specifically for President Trump is the steps that he took in order to address that. If the American government didn't feel like that was important, the way white Afrikaners and white South Africans are being treated in this country, they would not have opened the border to refugees from South Africa coming into America. You have to understand what the American government is going through in order to allow white Afrikaner refugees, as well as white refugees, more broadly speaking, and then also minority refugees, right? Because we know that there are coloreds that have gone into America. We know of Indian families that have gotten into America. What is it that the Americans are doing? They're paying for everything. So I've spoken to quite a few people that have gone through the refugee process already. They get a full medical exam paid for by the American government. They get a plane ticket paid for by the American government. They get a house paid for by the American people. Well, not even the government, it's the American people that is opening their doors to white South African refugees. You get food, you get a monthly allowance for the first 8 months. You get Medicaid and Medicare for the first 8 months that you are there. This is all done by the American taxpayer for the minority groups in South Africa that the American government, I believe correctly, have determined is currently facing severe persecution and oppression in our country. They wouldn't have done that if they didn't deem that as an important step. And the reason for it, I think, needs to be understood. Donald Trump did not ask Cyril Ramaphosa and the ANC to sequester Julius Malema, to lock him up, to take him to court, take him to jail. None of that. He asked a simple question. He asked them to condemn the singing of the song. Now, I think that was actually strategic. I think President Trump did this because he wanted to expose the ANC for what they truly are. Because think about this. All they had to do was condemn the song. That's it. They didn't have to lock him up. They didn't have to change the laws. They just, as the ANC, needed to say, we do not condone the singing of the song. It is a racist song, and therefore it should not be allowed. The fact that they would not do it, I think, speaks volumes of where the ANC finds themselves. I think it speaks volumes to the amount of racism that exists within the ANC. I think when you couple that with the prioritization of farm murders in South Africa and the request from the American government that those should be priority crimes, this allows President Trump to build a case, if you will, a case that he can take to the American people and say, look here, we asked that government to condemn a song that basically asks the majority of black South Africans to go and kill the minority white South Africans in the country. The government of that country, the government that is supposed to govern both the black and the white people in the country, refused to condemn the singing of that song, a song that directly calls for the murder and killing of white people in South Africa. We further asked them to make rural murders and crime a priority for the police. Again, they denied it. They said, no, we will not. In fact, they expended far more resources trying to deny that there was a problem in the rural areas of South Africa than actually just stopping the rural crime in the country. So fundamentally, this allows President Trump to go to the people of America and say, this government is gearing up, or at the very least allowing the building blocks and foundation of a genocide to play out in their own country. And they're doing this because they want to get rid of the white people in that country. Look at all the laws, right? So from that perspective, I think both the singing of the song as well as the priority crimes are lesser issues, but it plays into one of the major issues, which is the treatment of Afrikaners, white South Africans, and minorities more broadly in this country. I think another thing that needs to be remembered here is that if America is going to have trade relations with South Africa, they would prefer those those trade relations happen with a country that shares their values. The American system is very much built on the idea that a person should be judged based on the contents of their character, not the color of their skin. And so, from President Trump's perspective, there's no way that America can build a relationship with South Africa if the South African government has it the complete opposite. A person should be judged based on the race, the color of their skin, not the contents of their character. So I think that is perhaps, I would argue, that is perhaps the most important thing for President Trump, because it gives him leverage on the international stage. And then the thing that I think is even more important than that is BE. The requirement that BE be scrapped. And we're actually going to be watching the sort of Q&A section of Brent Bozell, the new ambassador from America to South Africa. We're going to be watching the Q&A section of his business because there's a number of things he said that I really want to delve into. But one of the big things that I think misconceptions that people have, and I only know this because I was lucky enough to listen to President Trump's former Secretary of State, where I think he was on Joe Rogan, and Joe Rogan asked him, about a number of decisions that the Trump administration took, during his first administration or his first 4 years in office. And the Secretary of State explained it as follows. The United States foreign policy consists of multiple different avenues, right? So you have the politicians that have their goals. They have things that they want to be able to do. But then a large part of foreign affairs and sort of foreign actions that the American government takes is driven by companies. So it's very rare that a United States president just wakes up one day and goes, well, I'm just going to put sanctions on Europe, right? Or I'm just going to place tariffs on Europe. It's almost never that hook, line, and sinker streamlined. Normally what ends up happening is you have a number of American corporations that complain to the State Department, because that's why the State Department exists, among other things. If you're a big corporation, you go to the State Department and you complain to them about treatment that you're getting in other countries. So, for example, when Facebook were heavily sequestered and silenced in Europe, Mark Zuckerberg went to the State Department. He actually testified about this before Congress. where he said they went to the State Department of Barack Obama and they told him, this is unfair. We are asked to do all of these incredible things in Europe with speech, and it's killing our business in Europe, and they're constantly issuing fines. The Barack Obama or the Obama administration wanted to do nothing about it, and as soon as Trump came in, Trump started putting immense pressure on Europe to relent on this, right? So companies are most likely the driving force behind this. The companies in America are saying, look, we don't want to invest. And it's sort of clear when you look at our foreign direct investment. Now, this is a big word, and I'm sure a lot of you know what it means. But for those of you that might not quite understand what foreign direct investment is, foreign direct investment is investment that isn't happening in a sort of roundabout way, right? So you may have a company that is investing in another country, and that country happens to do business every once in a while with South Africa. So that would be indirect investment. Or maybe you have a company that is investing in their own company in, say, for example, Brazil, and they happen to export a lot of their goods to South Africa. So it's, again, indirect investment. So while it may have a little bit of an effect and a benefit to South Africa, it won't really benefit South Africa. It's benefiting far more the Brazilian markets. Direct investment is where McDonald's steps in and says, look, we want to open 500,000 more stores in South Africa. And we want to expand all of these stores by at least twofold. And we're going to spend $500 billion doing that, right? And we're going to give double the amount of people jobs in the country. That would be an example of direct investment. This would be companies like Exxon, for example, coming to South Africa and saying, hey, you guys have shale gas? We're the world's leaders in turning shale gas into oil. How's about we do a deal here? You guys set up your shale gas operations in the Northern Cape. We set up our refineries that turn it into oil, and we all benefit. And then South Africa can become an oil exporting nation if it wants to. Or you can have South African companies, for example, investing in America, saying, hey, you guys have coal. We happen to be the world leaders in turning coal into oil. We can set up businesses. So foreign direct investment. I'm going to set up a business in your country, and I'm going to benefit your people with that investment. Currently, foreign direct investment in South Africa sits at around 15% of total GDP. That means effectively between 10 and 15%, you're on what is known as maintenance investment. In other words, the companies that are already here invest just enough to maintain operations. They're not really expanding. They're not trying to grow their businesses. They're not opening new mines or factories. They're just keeping alive what is already here. You want to potentially get to 20, 25, maybe even 30, 35% foreign direct investment. At 35%, this country's economy will explode. I mean, we would probably then see something like 8% economic growth per year if we could get to like 35%. But it is super important. Now, if you're a company living in America or existing in America and you're looking at South Africa, what is the immediate threats that face you in this country? Well, the first thing you're immediately looking at is BE. As soon as you want to open up, you're going to have to sell 30% of your company to someone else. And sometimes you're lucky you can sell it. Other times you just have to give it away. And you have to make all sorts of deals that allow you to keep operating in the country without giving away controlling stakes, right? So you have to do that. A company that you've built, you now have to give 30% of that to someone who has built nothing in their entire lives. Someone who, by the way, and I've spoken to a number of business owners that are in the BE industry, so they have BE partners. Those BE partners are beyond useless. In fact, I know of one guy who got a BE partner because, well, he had to have it in order to have his business with one of the state parastatals, I guess, one of the large state companies. And the BEE guy that he got that was referred to him by the government was referred to him under the guise that he would be able to get him more BEE contracts. Right, so that's the idea. He joins the company. He doesn't do any of the work because he doesn't know how to do any of the work. But he will then, sort of get more BE contracts and stuff for the company. As it turns out, the guy has and this is about 25 years now that this has been running. No, 22 years that this has been running. It was literally part of the first BEE thing that happened. This guy has never brought in a single contract. This guy takes 30% of the profits every single year. And what's funny, the contract that this business was built on with the state, they've already lost that contract. That contract was given to another caterer. So they no longer have the contract with the state that they used to have. This guy has never brought in a single contract in his life, no new contracts. They're now just sort of operating in normal business. He can't let go of that guy because that guy owns 30% of his business. And he's just sort of stuck now. Right? That's what a lot of foreign investors are looking at and going, wait, but I don't want to be stuck with some 30%er that's just going to leech off of my business. And then, of course, the other problem that they immediately look at is expropriation without compensation. If you actually look at the legal laws around it, it's very vague. Very vague. And the way the language is written, it effectively gives them the ability to take anything that they classify as property. I mean, go read the laws. If you guys, because they will tell you, all of the leftists that's defending the government nonstop, they'll tell you this is just so that the government can take things and help the country. But read the laws. Read the way the law is structured. If the government can qualify anything as property, it can take that property. That would include homes. That would include cars. That would include businesses. That would include land. That would include pretty much everything. If the government thinks that that is property and they can make a legal case for why that should be property, and it could probably even apply to intellectual property, right? So from the government's, from an American company's perspective, why the hell would I invest in this country? What is in it for me? I'm getting a country that isn't growing at the rate that it's supposed to grow at, which is keeping down profits. I mean, I would love to see how much money, if we take into account business losses as well, in terms of potential earning, how much money South Africa has actually lost in the last 30 years as a result of BEE and a whole host of race laws that exist in this country. Because and those race laws directly keep economic growth down, which is ultimately what I want to see. I want to see how much money have we actually lost. I am willing to bet it's in the trillions of rands, if not even more than that, right? So from these companies' perspective, there's no point. So I believe President Trump's main concern here, I think his main order of business is the South African government has to let go of BEE. And you could hear it actually from Bozell in his speech. He makes the case. They understand that the South African government wants to redress. They understand that. But the redress laws have not worked. And so from their perspective, they don't understand why American companies have to continue to suffer, why white-owned companies have to continue to suffer under a law that primarily only benefits the connected elite. This is what the Americans have a massive problem with. So I would say that's probably the order in which President Trump cares about this stuff. Now, before we get into this, because I do want to listen to this, but just before we do, I want to highlight one part of this that stood out to me that I thought was actually quite important. And maybe I'll quickly explain to you why. So towards the end of the Q&A session, Brent Bozell is asked, and we're not going to watch the whole thing, by the way. We're just going to watch a small snippet of it that I think is important. But towards the end of this, Alec asks Brent about why is South Africa so important, right? What is it about South Africa that vexes President Trump so? And Brent Bozell makes the case that normally ambassadors are chosen based on who donates the most. Right? You have a big donor, you send them as the ambassador, and the ambassador basically just goes to dinner and maybe makes a couple of deals, right? Ambassadors have an easy life. It's a nice retirement place, I guess you could say. In this case, however, President Trump phoned Brent Bozell personally. President Trump asked for Brent Bozell. And when he met with President Trump, one of the things that President Trump kept talking about was trade, specifically trade with South Africa. And President Trump is big on trade, as you guys know. You listen to President Trump speak, he is always talking about trade. The big problem, however, in South Africa, and this is something that I think the Americans still have to learn, the South African public does not know how economics function. So I actually replied here and just said the economically illiterate EFF, because they genuinely don't know how trade works. They don't know how business works. It's actually phenomenal when you read this statement from the EFF, where the EFF goes on to say that, let me just read this, and you guys will hear. In his address, Bozell precipitated his threats by referring to the continued and mutually beneficial relationship our nation has with US-based tech companies, namely Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Visa, and the more than 500 US companies which operate in South Africa. While these companies undoubtedly contribute to employment in our country, they conversely extract profit from our economy. Therefore, any suggestion that their commercial presence in South Africa is a sign of goodwill and commercial diplomacy by the US is indicative of the economic and political illiteracy that plagues the White House today. The language here from the ANC or from the EFF shows you the EFF has no idea what they're talking about. They don't know how it works. You see, because they believe that Amazon, Google, Facebook, all of these companies, they only contribute in terms of creating jobs, but they don't contribute in any other way to the economy whatsoever, right? Instead, they just extract wealth from our economy. Now, the reason I know that the EFF is mostly illiterate as well as the ANC is none of them have ever opened or owned businesses. None of them know how actual businesses operate within the economy. But you have to think about it. You have to think about the entire economy as a lot more connected than what Marxists have the capability of doing. So Marxists view the economy as a pie. And every single time there's a slither removed from the pie gets smaller for everyone else. So if you have a company that is extracting 300 billion rand from the South African economy, that means that there is 300 billion rand less money in the economy today, and therefore everyone else is fighting over a smaller piece of the pie. This is why Marxists love to say tax the rich, right? So that money that you've just extracted, we want that back so that we can give it to the poor. But the failure here is, imagine, for example, I were to set up a mine. So I establish my mine, and my mine is valued at 250 billion rand. So this is a big mine, right? And we're mining. Think about the companies, just the immediate companies that are involved in me setting up the mine. So we're talking about the companies that provided the buckies that drive on the mine, the companies that provided the trucks and the lorries that drive around on this mine, moving the goods that we extract from one point to another. Think about all the equipment, the machinery, the machines that pump oxygen into the mines. Think about the shovels, the pickaxes, the overalls, the PPE gear. Think about the medical personnel and the medical equipment that has to be on the mine at all times. Now go even further and think about the offices, the desks, the chairs, the coffee, the tea, the sugar, the milk that has to be supplied to the people who actually work there. The air conditioners that have to be installed so that those people don't die in the heat. Think about the housing, because a lot of mines actually have housing for their employees on the mines or on property that is owned by the mines. Those houses needed to be built. They needed to be furnished. They need to be maintained. All of this creates not only jobs in the economy, but also creates wealth for other companies, because the mine didn't just dream up a big lorry. They had to go buy that lorry from Isuzu. Isuzu had to produce that lorry using steel, aluminium, all sorts of mechanical and electrical equipment, wire, copper, gold, most likely goes into some of the microchips that go into those lorries in order to make them as advanced as they are. And so fundamentally, all of those mines also needed offices and needed air conditioning and needed equipment. So one mine, most likely, if you were to track it, would be spreading wealth to 10, 15,000 companies connected to companies connected to companies. So when you just think that, oh, yeah, Amazon is just creating jobs, Amazon is creating a lot more wealth than just jobs, right? And all of that wealth is reliant, because what did Amazon do? They built data centers here. Who do you think built the data center? What do you think went into building that data center? Where did they get the bricks? They bought them from companies here in South Africa. Where did they get the steel, the aluminium, the zinc? All of this stuff comes from South Africa. These are mines. So the EFF and the Marxists in the ANC, they only look at the sort of easiest to identify. They make some jobs, but they extract all of these millions. But when you actually look, a great example of it would be Bill Gates. Bill Gates was once the richest man alive, right? And he was worth about 95 billion US dollars at the peak, 95 or so billion US dollars. But when you actually look, and there are actual economists that did the numbers here and did the math on this, when you look at the amount of wealth that Bill Gates is worth versus the amount of wealth that Bill Gates created, Bill Gates is worth about 95 billion US dollars. In terms of the wealth that he has created as a result of Microsoft and as a result of the business that Microsoft is involved in, is orders of magnitude more. We're talking trillions of dollars of wealth that his company has created. Because if you think about it, your business might run Windows. Your business operates as a result of what Microsoft did. Right? So all of the wealth that your company is creating owes a lot of that to what Microsoft was able to do. Microsoft, of course, isn't really getting any of that money that your business is making, but it did enable your business to be able to do that, right? So when you talk about the value that businesses add to an economy, it's not just job creation, but the EFF, of course, there's no way that these guys can ever understand this because they're Marxists. And most fundamentally, they've never created anything in their entire lives. But okay, back to Brent Bozell. Brent Bozell is then, he leaves that trade discussion where President Trump is big on trade. He wants trade. And why? Why is South Africa so important? Because he actually asks one of President Trump's senior staff members, in terms of all the countries in the world, how important is South Africa really to President Trump? And the senior staff member says, in the top 10. Now, as soon as he said this, I was like, oh, wait, why? South Africa, this tiny little country on the southern edge, southern tip of Africa, with a government that has completely ruined and destroyed most of the industry and most of the country, a country that geopolitically is incredibly important, but provided that this country isn't powerful enough to really do anything, you don't really need to worry much, right? It would be very different if the South African government was as powerful as the Russians or the Chinese, because then we would be geopolitically incredibly important to a lot of the power players. But as long as the South African government can't really stop American ships from sailing around the tip of the Cape, there's not much that they have to worry about in terms of South Africa's geopolitical location. Why is South Africa so important to President Trump? South Africa, in the hands of a good government, could very easily, and I mean very easily, be within the top 5 most powerful nations on earth, if not second most powerful. We will probably never rival America because America just has more people than we do, right? And they're bigger, just in terms of landmass, they're bigger. But you think about South Africa, think about why America is so powerful. Think about what makes America so powerful. America is very much a world in one country. They have access to vast amounts of resources. They can pretty much rely on themselves and themselves alone. Their people are incredibly rich, very well educated, very well skilled, right? And so America doesn't really need the rest of the world all that much. And with President Trump and the plans that he has within the next few years, America may genuinely not need the rest of the world for most of the basic needs that they have. South Africa is the same. You name a mineral, and South Africa either has the most of it in the world or among the most of it in the world. Right? We're still the number one gold producing nation in the world. We have platinum, we have aluminium, we have rare earth minerals, we have oceans. Literally, most of our country is connected to the ocean. Right? We have one border at the top. The rest is all just ocean. Oceans have incredible financial wealth. We have shale gas in the Northern Cape that for some reason we're not extracting, but we have shale gas. And according to the reports, at least, we may have the largest shale gas reserves in the world sitting under the Northern Cape. There's reports that says that we may have oil off the West Cape coast, right? So fundamentally, if we could actually turn those into real industries, like let's imagine we don't have oil. Let's just take the shale. Shale gets turned into oil. We have coal. We have the best coal in the world. Our coal is among the highest grade in the world. This is what has allowed us to actually turn that coal into oil. Because if you're using dirtier coal, like for example, China, their coal would have to go through a massive amount of trouble in order to become oil because it's incredibly dirty and low grade oil. Our oil is so high grade that we can actually turn it into oil pretty simple. And then we have our own oil. That's an untapped industry. There is so much coal in Mpumalanga. We could have 5, 10, 15 more mines extracting coal, turning that, build out Sasol, further increase its production. We could probably get to a place where Sasol provides 40, 50% of the oil that we need in this country. But for that, we need energy. It just so happens we have the coal for the energy. And if we wanted to build nuclear power plants, guess where some of the best uranium in the world is located? South Africa. South Africa has everything, right? We have enough food to feed ourselves. And that which we don't have, we have neighbors that have tons of it. Literally, right next door, we have neighbors that have all of it. President Trump noticed that. And so President Trump immediately thought to himself, wait a second. If South Africa is an ally, a genuine ally, and if South Africa genuinely starts to work with the United States, the sky's the limit. Because you have companies in America that would gladly set up refining operations right here in South Africa, build out the mines, refine the goods here in South Africa, export those refined goods all over the world, including to America, where it can be manufactured and where it can be turned into actual goods that the world needs. South Africa would be the solution to all of America's problems because we have so much of everything on offer. But that requires a country that isn't openly hostile towards America, that isn't openly just buying all of the nonsense that the rest of the world wants to throw towards America. Right? Because the South African government has bought hook, line, and sinker into Israel is behind all of the evil in the world, which then means, of course, that they naturally align with Iran, a regime that literally just less than a month ago killed over 30,000 of their own people that were fed up with the government. Now, I don't care how you feel about Israel, right? If you want to hate Israel, go for it. But I want you to understand that you are siding with a regime that killed more than 30,000 of their own people. And let's be clear, this is a number that they aren't even disputing. You look at the interviews throughout the world done with Iranian ambassadors. The Iranians aren't even disputing these numbers. But they call them, we have small problems here in our country. If you're siding with that regime, I don't care what your gripes or problems is with Israel. You are on the wrong side of this issue. 100%. I don't even give a crap whatever else you have a problem with. If you're idea here is that Israel is the problem and Iran is a sovereign state, you're on the wrong side of this. Just look at your friends. Look at the people that you are, look at the company that you keep. Right? And I see it. People like Tucker Carlson, people like Dave Smith, they're all on board the hate train for America, the hate train for Israel. But look at the company that you keep. Look at the countries that are in support of you. Iran. They agree with you. Israel is the greatest evil. In fact, they will help you to reach a final solution for the Israeli people. South Africa. Another government with some very questionable morals. China. A government with, they are the kings of questionable morals. Russia. The left in the UK. The left in Spain. These are the people that's your friends. They are in the room with you. They agree with your stance against Israel. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to love Israel. That doesn't mean that you have to care who Israel is or what they do, right? You can hate Israel, but you have to be able to identify that in this case, Israel is not wrong. In this instance, the world will be a better place when the Islamic regime of Iran is completely eradicated. And I mean every single Islamist in Iran is dead or blown up. The world will be a better place for it. And if you can't see that, right? If you can't see that even though, right, even a broken clock is right at least twice a day, it is possible that Iran is the world's most evil regime. Entirely possible. But on this issue, Iran is not wrong. On this one issue, Iran is not wrong. Israel is not wrong. Iran is a cancer that has to be removed. If you don't see that, there's little help, right? But from the Americans' perspective, they're looking at it, and Brent Bozell speaks about this. They're looking at South Africa and they're asking some serious questions. The South African regime continues to play footsie with some of the most evil regimes in the world, sending condolences to the Iranians. And you know what's worst about all of this? You know what's worse about all of this? The Americans aren't even asking the South Africans to become allies of America. They're asking for South Africa to go back to non-alignment. They're just saying, stop being aligned. Stop picking sides. You keep picking the terrorist side. We don't care if you don't want to pick sides, but then don't pick sides. That's the worst part of this. The ANC is literally spitting in their face, and all they had to do was not pick a side. That's as simple as it is. Okay, so let's quickly listen to this. I'm going to read your opinions on Israel in a second, guys, I promise. Francho, by the way, thank you so much for the super chat, sir. I really appreciate you. Thank you. But okay, I want to show you guys, it's about 2-3 minutes of this Q&A that I wanted to show you guys. So it's not going to be too long.
So it feels like there's a moment of opportunity. And you would probably have 99% of the people in this room saying, yay. But what can be done by these people and the business tribe generally to grasp that opportunity, given the blockages that do exist?
Well, yeah, what you learn when you arrive here, and I've only been here 3 weeks, three and a half weeks, is the complexity of the situation. You also learn that there are those in the government who want to see the business community succeed, while there are those in the government, frankly, don't want to see it.
I want to pick him up on this, and this is why I wanted to watch this, because there's a couple of things that I want to clarify. There are those in the ANC that wants to see the business community succeed. But, and this needs to be understood within the confines and within the context of the ANC, they are communists and Marxists. So what they want the business community to succeed with is within the framework of Marxism, right? And that's still not going to lead to business success. It's not going to lead to it. But you are correct in the broad stroke. There are those who are what I would call China light within the ANC. They sort of look at the Chinese system and they go, well, we could have that system here. We can do what China has done, basically turn all corporations into slaves of the government. So yes, the businesses have to succeed, but the businesses answer to the government, and the government directs the businesses in whichever direction. So
I'll tell you where our position has been very firm. We put together 5 asks. I mentioned 3 of them, but there were a couple more. We put them forward to the South African government. We've been waiting for almost a year for a response. And as I've made clear in meetings that I've had, the United States is I should look at it this way too. We're running out of patience.
that's big, guys. Now, of course, again, you look at the way the South African freedom fighters have responded. They don't care. In fact, they take what he said there as a threat. He has threatened the South African government, and they will not stand for this, right? And you can just look at my screen here. I'm sharing with you guys how the freedom fighters in South Africa have sort of taken what's been said. Our favorite on this channel, at least, Mr. Fikile Mbulula, the Secretary General of the ANC, he makes it clear that America must not threaten South Africa, that South Africa will do whatever it wants, and that this is how South Africa will operate without the Americans telling South Africa what they can and cannot do. There's massive calls for expulsion of Brent Bozell, believing that he's criticized the country, and criticizing the country is a good reason to expel an ambassador. That's actually not how that works. The reason Razul was expelled from America wasn't because he was criticizing America. He has the right as an ambassador to say that we don't agree with what America is doing. That's in fact what ambassadors are supposed to do. It was that he called the president a racist white supremacist. You have Cyril Ramaphosa that have literally in his interview, the interview that I covered yesterday with the New York Times, he called President Trump a white supremacist and said that President Trump has white racist laws that he sort of pushes and touts throughout the world. So South Africa is doubling down. But if you listen to what Brent is saying here, the Americans are starting to run out of patience. They have given the South Africans the leeway that they require. And for those of you that is sort of wondering, well, what exactly does it mean? What does it mean? So here you have the Bureau of African Affairs. This is a state. It's part of the Secretary of State, so the State Department in America. The Bureau of African Affairs that says the New York Times is out to lunch at POTUS's right to draw attention to government-sponsored race-based discrimination in South Africa. So Ramaphosa and the ANC doubled down on a racial patronage system that only enriches connected elites while ordinary South Africans struggle and crime and unemployment rank among the world's worst. These same leaders failed to condemn racial incitement against Afrikaners and offer condolences to the brutal Iranian terrorist regime. Constructively addressing these issues is necessary to reset US-South Africa relations. This is from the Department of the Secretary of State, so the State Department in the US. There's another one here, also from the House Majority. Let me just see. Where did I tweet that out? When did I post that, rather? Sorry, guys. I post a lot because there's a lot of stupid crap that happens in our country that I have to consistently call out on X. That's Reuters in Africa, Visegrad. Israel's Foreign Affairs Ministry. Where is that? Did I skip that now? I don't think so. I don't know when I when I retweeted that, but I retweeted it, I think maybe last week, where the Senate majority, they tweeted out about South Africa, or posted on X about South Africa and what is currently happening in South Africa, and how South Africa is starting to rub the United States the wrong way. Now, of course, we've been doing it for a while, but the doubling down, that is the part that the Americans are noticing. They're taking notice of it. Now, I will just quickly, and this is not me suggesting that this is what will happen. Let's be clear. I'm just saying, Venezuela, President Trump and the Americans gave Venezuela a lot of time. They were negotiating with Venezuela. These negotiations with Nicolas Maduro ran for almost 6 months. In the 6 months that these negotiations were playing out, Maduro kept making noise about Russia and China and kept opening Venezuela more and more to the Russians and the Chinese. One night, Nicolas Maduro woke up in a helicopter on his way to New York City to face justice in an American court for crimes that America deems he committed. Iran was given every opportunity to negotiate. They were offered, and this is something that I didn't even know until yesterday, the Americans offered the Iranians lifetime free nuclear fuel for civilian nuclear power plants. Not lifetime. The Americans would gift them for all eternity as much uranium as they need for civilian use, so power stations. The Iranians said, nope, we don't want that. They want the uranium. Why? Because it allows them to build nukes, or at least pursue their nuclear dreams. They have said repeatedly, you have the son of the Ayatollah saying in plain words, plain English, the second we have that nuclear bomb, we're bombing Israel. You have the son of the previous Ayatollah, Khomeini's son, that said Israel knows that the second Iran is in a position to attack, they will wipe Israel off the face of the earth. And then they will go for America. So first Israel, then America. And this isn't because of some aggression from the West. This isn't because the West first attacked. In fact, if you look at what happened in 1979, the Americans and the National Party of South Africa, by the way, tried everything in their power to make deals with the Iranians. The South Africans were very successful. In fact, it was Iran that supplied South Africa with oil from about 1980 all the way to the sort of 1992. Iran was keeping the apartheid government fueled for the most part. For America, this was a little different. You see, America tried to curry favor with the new regime, believing that this new regime would be better than the Shah. The issue? 5 years later, the Iranians capture the embassy of America and hold the Americans there hostage. Not long after that, they bomb a military base, killing over 240-something people at the military base. It's the Iranian regime that started the aggression towards America. Why? Well, you need only look at Islamist theology. If you're part of Islam, and specifically Shia, the Shia sect within Islam is particularly violent, although the Sunnis have had their moments, and there are Sunni sects that are just as violent. But Shia specifically have a very extreme demand that all nations belong to Allah. All nations belong to Allah. And that it is incumbent upon the Muslims that follow the Shiite cult to work tirelessly to bring every single nation on earth under the house of Islam. So for Iran, America can never be a friend because America is not a Muslim country. It's a Christian country. And as a result of that, America needs to be destroyed, right? That's been their quest. That's been their call. That's what they've wanted to do for a very, very long time. I quickly want to say, Gnostica, thank you so much for the $23 donation. I truly appreciate that from the bottom of my heart. I'm doing very well. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much, sir. Then Gnostica for the 5 gifted subs or the 5 gifted memberships. I really appreciate you, sir. Thank you so much for that. And then, of course, to GG Evan for the $5 super chat. Really appreciate you, sir. Thank you so much for that. With everything that's happening right now, John McCain is rolling in his grave since he didn't get to do it his way. No, they didn't, Jan. They didn't. And we have the evidence for that. You can go listen to what the National Party themselves had to say about it. They were getting a lot of oil. Remember, and this is important that people understand this, from about the 1980s, South Africa is under sanction. So no country is legally allowed to trade with South Africa. South Africa is under a complete embargo. Iran was one of the countries that was financing the South African government with oil. In fact, it's the National Party themselves that said the Iranian government kept the fight alive. So no, what people believe is the official story, that's just wrong. People like to look at the official narrative that's put out by the ANC. Because that narrative that you're pushing right there, that's the narrative from the ANC. The ANC will tell you that Iran, the Shah, did business with the National Party, but as soon as the Khomeini came to power and the Iranian regime came to power in 1979, they cut South Africa off immediately. That's the ANC narrative. One of the things I will warn people about is trusting the Marxist narrative. In Marxism, there's very interesting things with Marxism. But one of the things is, and I've said this to you guys before, that which advances the revolution is ethical. So for Marxism, truth is a completely subjective thing. Truth is whatever advances the revolution. And so, if it is helpful, there's a great story in 1984 where George Orwell writes about this war, this never-ending war that his country is in. Obviously, the main character. But no one really knows who the enemy is, because the enemy swaps every few years the other country, because there's 3 main countries. I can't remember all of them now. It's been a while. I actually have to read 1984 again. But there's 3 main continents, supercontinents, effectively. One is Eurasia. One is Oceania. I can't remember what's the other one called. Someone here will know. But they don't know who their eternal enemies are. Because every once in a while, like every 5 years or so, the enemy changes. But the party then just changes the language. In other words, Eurasia is our enemy. We have always been fighting against Eurasia. But the main character is like, but wait, we were at war with these other guys not that long ago. I remember we were at war with these other guys not that long ago, and Eurasia was actually one of our allies. But the party just pretends something completely different. So Marxists have no truth. There exists zero truth within communists. When a communist tells you anything, you need to understand they are advancing the revolution. That is what they do. And if they have to lie to you in order to advance the revolution, they will do so. And the big problem is that most of the Marxists that follow them, they're not even the ones lying. They're just the ones believing the lies. Because, well, I like to believe that Marxists are high in knowledge, very low in wisdom. They know a lot of things about a lot of things. They have no ability to understand what it is they know. And so when it comes to Marxists, there's just, you cannot believe the words that comes out of their mouths. But okay, let's continue to listen to this.
We believe that more and more it becomes a statement by the South African government when it doesn't want to respond to simple questions that we have. We may not get clarity on the kill the boer chant that we believe is hate speech. I'm sorry, I don't care what your courts say. It's hate speech.
Based. Based. It is hate speech. There is no world in which you can tell me that singing that song isn't hate speech. I'm sorry, but what the hell are you talking about? Right? And I don't care if you want to say, oh, but this is a struggle song. I don't give a crap. I don't give a crap. Your struggle song does not give you the right to sing Kill the Boer, Kill the Farmer. You're a racist piece of crap, and you deserve to hang for that song. Because you are inciting the violence that is being committed against white people in this country every single day. That is Julius Malema's greatest crime in this country.
We believe that there is clarity on the expropriation. We believe we can find these things. But the South African government has to step up to the plate. At this point, what I'm saying to the business community, you do too. What I don't have patience for, and I'll be very blunt here. I'm known for being blunt. This is why the president asked me to do this. But I don't want to hear businesses say one thing publicly and another thing privately.
Oh, that is the part that I don't want to show you guys more because it's a nice talk, but I don't want to steal content from BizNews. This is their content and you guys can go watch it. But that's the part that I genuinely, this is the thing that we desperately need here in South Africa. We have so many people that in private, they're all about how they hate this and how they don't like BEE and how they don't like what the government is doing. But these same businesses are the ones keeping the government in business. These same corporations are the ones going along with every single one of the government's requirements. What is the government going to do if every business in South Africa tomorrow says, no, we will not comply with BEE. We will not comply with your insane tax regime. We're done. What is the government going to do? Lock up everyone? Shut down all of the business in South Africa? It will destroy the economy. The ANC will be between a rock and a very hard place, and they know it. The ANC understands that if this were to happen, this, by the way, is why the freedom fighters are so out of control, angry at the moment. Because they understand that if the people of South Africa were to ever stand up and say enough of this, we've had enough, the ANC is in trouble. They're in serious trouble. And I believe, quite frankly, that I think the ANC is afraid. I think the ANC is incredibly afraid. And the reason for that fear is Iran. I think what happens in Iran now is sending shivers down the spines of Brazil, down the spines of South Africa, because there's an interesting realignment that is taking place throughout the world. India has just strengthened its ties with America. In fact, America has gotten India to, firstly, import a lot less oil from Russia, but also to move some of its business away from China and towards America. India's prime minister just went to Israel to meet with Benjamin Netanyahu. And he actually called Benjamin Netanyahu a great friend. So India has already sort of gone BRICS what? Right? Instead, let's call it BRICS, right? Because that's better. It sounds better to us. So the BRICS, the I in BRICS has already sort of started to wane and might be moving away from the BRICS coalition. More importantly, if you look across the board, the Iranian war already achieved everything it needed to achieve. Because the Iranian war proved to the allies of America, if you need us, we will be there for you. But it also did something else. It proved to the allies of Russia and China, if you need us, we will not come. Venezuela, Russia and China did not come. Iran, Russia and China did not come. If you need us, we will not come. And I think the ANC, people like the ANC, and yes, that's what I'm referring to. For those of you that don't know what I'm referring to, Brazil's president just had a conversation with Cyril Ramaphosa in which he said that both Brazil and South Africa needs to improve their military cooperation for in case they get invaded. That suggests that there is a real sort of threat from within those regimes, that they understand that they're alone. They understand that there's some serious problems that may or may not be happening in the very near term. And they're afraid because they understand that the Chinese will not come. The Chinese just will not arrive. Most of the Middle Eastern nations, they already know if they need help, America is there because America is currently fighting the war on their behalf. Right? And a lot of them are actually now also fighting Iran. So clearly, the Middle East has already accepted America is the only partner. China, the way China was able to convince a lot of the Middle Eastern countries to join BRICS was by saying, hey, we have control of the Iranians. If you guys all join BRICS and Iran joins BRICS, we have control of the Iranians. We can tell them what they can and cannot do. How did that work out? Look at what happened. The second Israel and America attacked Iran, Iran started bombing everyone. All of the friends. So China clearly doesn't have control, and that's because you can never have control of the Iranian regime. They're an Islamist terrorist organization. They want to kill and destroy everything. They would gladly take down the entirety of the Middle East alongside them. I think this is putting a lot of pressure on the South African government. I think the ANC is genuinely sort of, I think they're caught between a rock and a hard place. They're in a corner. The ANC cannot let go of their genuine hatred for the West, for capitalism, for white people. The ANC cannot let go of that. But what the ANC, I think, wasn't so prepared for was that Russia and China are not hardline communists. They expected that both Russia and China would be hardline Marxists, workers of the world unite, right? But that didn't actually happen. That didn't actually happen. That didn't actually achieve anything. China and Russia did not come to their aid. China and Russia did not come to help them. And fundamentally, I think South Africa is maybe the ANC members are starting to worry. Maybe there is a part of them that's going, guys, this might not work out that well for us. You know, what if America were to start applying serious pressure on South Africa? What if the Americans, because you can hear it, Brent Bozell just said it, the Americans are starting to run out of patience. They have given South Africa more than enough time. South Africa has taken a year and it has done nothing. So from the American perspective, your non-answer is now turning into an answer. And you're effectively telling America to go kick rocks. We will do whatever we want to do. I personally think the ANC they're so ideologically captured that they can't change, even though they kind of understand that the current trajectory that they are on is not a workable one. It's not one that can last. And more specifically, we have to talk about a massive development that's just happened in Iran. And I'm going to be I'm gonna be with all of you guys in a second, right? And I'll listen to what you guys have to say. But there's a big piece of this puzzle. President Trump had a phone call with President Vladimir Putin. This is 2 days ago now, or almost 2 days ago. And after that phone call, President Trump announced that they would be at least partially lifting sanctions from Russia. Now, President Trump sells this as because of the Strait of Hormuz that is currently sort of inoperable, and about 20% of the world's oil flows through the Strait of Hormuz. This is a problem, right? This is a serious problem. And oil has already responded. By the way, guys, I don't think you guys understand the pain that South Africans are about to go through. I do not think people understand this. Just going off of the current oil price, if it doesn't go any higher, and it will most likely go a lot higher, we're going to have almost 5 rand increase in the price of petrol per liter. That's going to happen next month. Unless the war ends tomorrow, which I don't think it will, you're going to look at 3, 4, maybe even 5 rand increase in petrol. Just now, that's going to lead to insane inflation numbers because everything is connected to oil. Everything is connected to oil. So the inflation is going to be sky high as a result of the oil price increases. Now, who stands to lose from this? And that's really the question that I wanted to discuss with you guys here. Why is President Trump doing this? Why lift the sanctions from Russia? I get that you don't want oil prices to go that high. But this also means that Ukraine is now in a very serious problem because Russia is now able to make a lot of money off of the oil that they have. Russia is I believe it's the world's second largest oil producing nation they have crap tons of gas. Russia is rich in those two minerals. So this will allow the Russian economy to come roaring back. But notice what Vladimir Putin announced right after the phone call with President Trump. He announced that Russia will immediately ramp up oil sales to Asia. And of course, we're specifically talking about China. Now that made me wonder why. Iran supplies a hell of a lot of oil to China, but at pennies to the dollar, right? Iran can't sell to anyone else, so they sort of have to take whatever the Chinese is willing to offer. But China isn't just now going to pay full price. China is going to pay a lot more than normal because oil is going to continue to rise. Right? Russia isn't really selling their oil to anyone else. They're just selling a lot of it now to China. This means that China is going to be buying oil from the Russians at what, $110, $120 a barrel? Maybe even higher than that? Because a lot of the oil that China normally gets comes through the Strait of Hormuz. America doesn't have that problem. They're a net oil exporter. America produces all of its own oil, so it doesn't need anyone else. A lot of the oil that Europe uses comes from Russia. Yes, surprise, surprise. Even during the sanctions, they still use mostly Russian stuff. And some of it comes from Canada when the Canadians can be asked to actually produce some oil. And Europe gets a little bit from Iran, but not all that much. Russia is now going to be the sole provider, effectively, to the Chinese economy in oil. So Russia could potentially set a price that is even higher than the market price, and China will have to pay it because China can't really get it from anywhere else. The Strait of Hormuz is shut down. So now I'm wondering, and this is just me spitballing, right? I have no evidence of this. This is purely speculation. But this could be the thing that President Trump uses to tank China. The Chinese economy will not be able to handle oil prices at full price, not at the rate in which China burns their oil, not at the rate at which China buys that oil. Now, is it hurting the rest of the world? Absolutely. Right? It's definitely hurting the rest of the world. We're all paying more for oil. But if you're the president of the most powerful nation on earth, and you're looking at China and you know that China is a serious problem, sometimes you have to go, well, everyone else will have to suffer so that we can kill or at least knock down the real threat. So sure, right? We're all going to pay more for oil. We're all going to pay more for fuel and all the rest of it, but it will destroy the Chinese economy, because the Chinese economy is very much built on cheap oil from Venezuela and Iran. Venezuela's already gone. If Iran goes, that's a huge chunk of the Chinese economy that is just now at the mercy of Russia. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is President Trump's big play. If this isn't President Trump talking to Russia and maybe talking to Vladimir Putin and saying, hey, we have a unique opportunity here to get rid of China. Are you going to play ball or are you not? Because I still believe, and this is just, again, part of my speculation, but I still believe President Trump wants at best to bring Russia over to the West. He wants Russia to break ties with China and with sort of South Africa. Because if you really think about it, Russia has very little in common with China, South Africa, Iran, or any of these dictatorships. And I realize a lot of you will say, well, they're a dictatorship, so that's what they have in common. To some extent, yes, right? Some extent, yes, but Russia is a capitalist country. People who've actually been in Russia will tell you it's the people that open the businesses that make the money. Russia doesn't have that high taxes. For the most part, the people in Russia are wheeling and dealing and doing their own thing. The government, yes, that is a dictatorship, but that is because of the Russian mindset. Russians don't really care that Putin is a dictator, provided that Putin maintains law and order. If Putin maintains law and order for Russians, that's good enough. They don't really care about anything else. And so, in all other ways, the Russian people have far more in common with the West than what the Russian people have in common with China or with South Africa or with Brazil. So I wonder if President Trump isn't doing this as a way to bring the Russian people onto the side of the West and bring Russia to the side of the West with a renewed enemy. Because fundamentally, all Europe really needs is an enemy, right? And I think President Trump also understands this. Europe requires an enemy. For Europe, Russia being an enemy was a great idea because the Russian bureaucrats can use, or the European bureaucrats can use Russia as the way to find a more unified Europe. Because from the bureaucrats' perspective, they want a United States of Europe. And Russia being the enemy is a good idea. But if President Trump could offer China as the big threat and replace Russia and bring Russia into the fold, I think that makes it a lot easier, right? And that probably eases a lot of the tension as well, which then allows America to say, hey, let's do our own thing. There is one other option here, and it's important that we cover all of our bases because all of this is speculation, but there is another scenario. President Trump is empowering Russia by lifting the sanctions on Russia, allowing Russia to move oil to China. But this is done to scare the living crap out of Europe. Because Russia can now rearm. Russia can finally spend more money. They can finally build more nukes or bombs or whatever the hell they want to build. And it is possible that Russia's perspective or that President Trump's perspective is one of two. Either Russia joins the West, in which case China becomes the last big enemy, or Russia becomes such a threat that the Europeans are forced to get their act together. So this will force the European countries to actually start spending more on defense, to actually start spending more on their militaries, rather than just paying lip service to it. So it achieves the goal either way. But fundamentally, China remains the big issue. And this is the one thing that I always find when I listen to people. Because one of the theories that annoys me to no end is people who say that this is Israel's war. It annoys me because there are dozens of reasons that I know why America would want to attack Iran. Dozens of reasons. And China sits at the top of every single one of those reasons. Iran falling is literally removing one of the strongest strategic partnerships that China has in Iran. So from America's perspective, Iran falling hurts China directly. There's reasons why America would want to do that, because they want to hurt China. And then to just claim that, oh, this is Israel's war. It's like, well, two things can be true at the same time. It is possible, entirely so, that Israel wanted to attack Iran. And that is true. Israel said as much. Bibi Netanyahu said that he's been dreaming about this war for 40 years. And that was a great opportunity for the Americans to go, well, we want to bomb Iran too. Because, well, unlike Israel, that's literally just thinking about their existence, America is thinking this will hurt China. And we really want to hurt China. But Israel wanting to attack Iran gives us the perfect cover. Because we can hurt Iran, and we can simply claim that, well, if Israel attacked Iran, Iran would attack American bases. We had no choice. Sorry, oops-a-daisy. Sorry, Xi Jinping. But you're losing an ally now, but that's only because of what Israel wanted to do. We're just helping out so that our military bases don't get bombed in the meantime. Right? So it's the perfect cover. I get to hurt what I view as my greatest adversary, and Israel takes all the flack. Israel is the one that wanted to start the war in the first place. We're just here protecting our own interests. But people who blame Israel for everything, they don't ever ask, what does America have to gain? And for some reason, people seem to have this thing of two things can't be true at the same time. It's only Israel's war. It's not possible that America may have interests there as well. And this just happens to play perfectly into what they want. I never understand that, why people are so single-minded in their focus. That makes no sense to me. But okay. Let's get to what you guys have to say about this. I have more to say, but I want to get to you guys as well. I've been rattling on for an hour and 20 minutes. Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union in World War II, not a part of Russia. Edelon, how you doing, sir? I wouldn't call it hurting China, more like pressuring China to behave. Hurting China is how they're applying that pressure. But it is important to understand President Trump is effectively, I would almost put President Trump in the same vein as like Julius Caesar, or maybe even to some extent Marcus Aurelius. Not saying he's the same kind of great man, although I do think President Trump is a great man. But it was thanks to incredible Caesars that saw the problems within the Roman Empire and acted accordingly, that the Roman Empire's existence continued to be extended. If you look throughout the history of the Roman Empire, within about 250 years of the establishment of the Roman Empire, the empire is already sick and basically dying. But then every few Caesars, there comes a Caesar that notices some of the problems and then corrects it. In his lifetime, he makes a number of moves that then corrects those problems, and that extends the life cycle of the Roman Empire. And I view President Trump as a similar man in this period in time. If President Trump didn't come around, let's imagine the Democrats remained in power for basically the next 50 years. I have a good sense that America would have become an irrelevant country probably within the next 30 years. If you look at American debt, you look at American competitiveness throughout the world, you look at the fact that America produces absolutely nothing of value that is required in order to be able to defend your own country. We found out as a result of the tariffs that if America went to war with China, China could shut down all of the equipment and all of the raw minerals and raw materials that America would need in order to build battleships. China had control of all of that. What kind of country can claim that it is a sovereign nation if it cannot even build and manufacture the basic elements required in order to defend itself? Bombs, guns, bullets, ships, submarines. If another country holds the keys to that, they hold the key to your kingdom. And the Democrats was basically happy to just let China become more and more powerful. And it would have reached a point in about 20, 25 years from now where China would have been so powerful that the United States could just basically now watch. The United States would no longer have been in a position to challenge the Chinese. And I believe President Trump came in and he realized this. He recognized that there is only one option. America has to take back what it has lost. And in order for America to do this, they have to hurt China. China is going to have to suffer because China is going to lose a lot of business to America. But this is a necessity. The problem that the Chinese have, and this is something we can talk about in the future if you guys really want to go into detail on this, but China is done. I don't see a future where the Chinese economy is a big economy in the next 20 years. All else being equal, so all things staying the same, China is in big trouble. And the reason for it is the Chinese government has been trying for the last 15 years to boost consumerism, right? The consumer part of the economy, to get actual Chinese consumers to buy stuff. And as it turns out, the Chinese people are not very consumer minded. They don't really spend that much money. This is really bad for a country that wants to become a world superpower. Because if the manufacturing were to stop, and it is stopping, who's actually keeping your economy alive? Because your own people aren't doing it. They're just not spending that much money in the economy. So I think China is in serious problem. Serious trouble. Because everything is made in, even your most expensive plucky from Louis Vuitton. News, how are you doing, sir? The Germans were scared of the Russians. When Iran attacked their Muslim neighbors, affecting their livelihood was a grave mistake on Iran's part. Karen, you're not wrong. Trump is the only one prepared to step up and do something instead of saying don't. Esther, I think the difference is stark, right? But it is interesting. It's interesting. And I'm going to make this video for Truth Social after the stream. I'll quickly record this video. But it is interesting to note that the reason the rest of the world is struggling with President Trump so much is because President Trump is not a politician. And in our world today, we have completely forgotten how to deal with that. We're used to politicians whispering sweet little nothings into our ears. We're used to politicians lying to our faces but making it sound good. We don't like the harsh truth. We don't like when politicians say what they mean and then actually do it. That hurts our sensibilities. We'd rather have politicians just lie, right? And President Trump is a businessman. Businessmen operate on a completely different function. They're not about being popular. Businessmen are about business. It's about making money. And oftentimes businessmen aren't popular. But if I'm making money, then I don't give a crap, right? Whether you like me or not, I'm successful at what I'm doing. And President Trump is in the perfect position now. He doesn't have to care about, popularity. They can't vote for him again. This is his last term. So from President Trump's perspective, he now wants to get things done. He wants to leave America a better country than what he found it. And he's going to continue to go until that dream has been achieved. And he hopes that he is successful enough that JD Vance can be the president after him and Marco Rubio can be the president after JD Vance. That's the dream. That's the hope. Will he be successful? Well, that's all up in the air. I think he will be, but I could be wrong, right? Because there's no way to predict the future on this stuff. It's actually doing crap. True. Here's an interesting fact. RSA selling missiles to the UAE. So I smell a fish. Llewellyn, I would not be surprised. I think there's bigger fish out there that might be up for a good smelling in the very near term. I think America has some stuff on South Africa that will be dropped in probably within the next few months. Then Trump took out the Venezuelan oil supply being shipped to Iran before going to Iran. The I in BRICS, that oil processed in Iran goes to China. The C in BRICS. Elon, yes, that is all of what you're saying is true. I would just like to point out, however, that the I in BRICS is not Iran. The I is India. But although you could say Iran now because India is no longer really playing ball, right? Trump is better businessman than what Ramaphosa is. Ramaphosa was never a businessman. This is the thing that irritated me at the time when Ramaphosa was going to be the next president of South Africa. What irritated me is all these people that said Ramaphosa is a businessman, Ramaphosa is a businessman, it's amazing. And I was just like, he's not a businessman. He's never built a single business in his entire life. He's a BEE cadre. He was connected to the ANC, and the ANC gave him a crap ton of money in order to buy a stake in McDonald's. And thanks to BEE legislation, McDonald's had no choice. They had to sell to him. Right? That's the truth of what happened. He's never made anything of value. So, businessman, not so much. You focus too much in Trump. Things are changing already in the US. Reinhard, explain to me what you think is happening in the US. And more importantly, why do you believe I'm focusing too much on Trump? I still like Trump. Don't know what some of these black-pilled weirdos are on about. Grandfall, I personally think a lot of people like to listen to what the media tells them. And as I found out yesterday in the research for my video about AI, well, I found it out a while ago, but in my video, the research that I've been doing over the last few weeks for my video yesterday about AI, one of the things that really stood out to me and was super interesting is that humans don't process information. Humans filter information. Now, that's an important distinction, and one that a lot of people, I think, don't always take into account. You might have someone, and I know people like this, that will tell me that the mainstream media has been captured. You can't trust the mainstream media. But only when the mainstream media says things that they don't agree with. The second CNN tells them that Trump is unpopular and that Trump's war is unpopular, oh, I believe that. This is the one time that CNN is actually honest. What makes you so certain? You know how much they lie, but now because they're saying what you need to hear, suddenly that's the honest part of it. Right? But we're all like this. We don't process information, we filter it. So it doesn't matter who says what, provided that I like what they're saying, I will believe them. Even if it comes from a completely wrong source. So even if I know that this source doesn't know what the hell they're talking about, provided that I like what they're saying, I'll believe them. Atari, how you doing? That's why Trump said businessman the way he did. turn the lights down. True. It's already very, very true. Miles for a beer, Budavors, get him up and says. As far as I know, he basically lives off of cheeseburgers and Diet Coke. Anglo American for creating Cyril Ramaphosa. I think when you're probably not wrong. You're probably not wrong. Sadly and thankfully, my eyes have been open to the politics and work affairs in the past decade. Gordon, I think a lot of people. So the thing is, I don't think. Thank you, Antara. I really appreciate that. I think what happens, even if we're aware of it, and I catch myself oftentimes. This happens to me as well, where I'll read an article from say News 24 or from Daily Maverick, and because the article confirms some of my own held biases, I'm inclined to believe what the article says because the article confirms my bias. I already believed this, and now this article simply confirms what I believe. That's the big issue with all of us. And that's the big issue that we have with the mainstream media, right? And I think until people realize that, until people, you have to be so painfully aware. And I catch myself often, this will happen to me. So often, this will happen to me where I see something and I go, yep, I knew it. And then I go, wait, who's the source of this? Who is saying this? And then if it's someone on X, I'll click on their name, go to their profile, and I'll look at some of the other things that they post. And within like 5 minutes, you get a sense that this is just some guy constantly on the wrong side of issues. And that immediately now I try to push myself towards, okay, wait, let's approach this now from first principles. Let's start arguing through this, not from the perspective of I like what I'm hearing, but rather from the perspective of is this true? And let's use first principles to get there, right? So it takes a lot longer to go through information, but at least you know that when you arrive at an opinion, it's not just confirmation bias that got you there. Because that's the only way, by the way, to fight confirmation bias. Well, there's two ways. There's two ways to ensure that you're not struggling with confirmation bias. The first is to reason from first principles. So don't just believe what you see and be cognizant of the fact that you are biased and then reason from first principles. The second is to have friends that you disagree with. Have people that don't see the world the same way you do. That is perhaps the most important thing you can ever have. Find people who see the world differently. Because those are the people that will ultimately help you see where your blind spots lie. You need that. So he was a union lawyer. He made his name negotiating for miners before the new administration came in. Lamborghini, well, yeah, but I would argue that it doesn't matter when it comes to the leadership of the world. That's the kind of people you find in charge of pretty much everything these days. Lawyers who spend most of their lives either in unions or connected to unions or connected to the government. Career politicians. I would argue Cyril Ramaphosa is a career politician. He's never built anything of value in his entire life. He doesn't know how value works. She can never see the world how I see it. Check again. Double then, triple. Any info always. Battery, very, very true. She can never see the world. Something just snapped. Give me a second here, guys. Something just fouled. Sorry, guys. We had there's some ginger beer that was downstairs, and my domestic helper is here cleaning, and the bottle's actually been standing on my fridge for probably like 3 or 4 months. I forgot about it, so it's just been standing up there. And I just heard. I don't think the mic picked it up, but I just heard like something. It sounded like something foul or maybe exploded. And as it turns out, she was moving the bottle, and it had built up so much pressure that it genuinely exploded. So the entire kitchen is full of ginger beer. And yeah, that's just okay. If you guys heard it, it must have been very loud. But yeah, so that just happened. That's fun. Critical thinking class, Pretoria Uni 101. I wouldn't even trust universities with that, Mark, because yeah, no, she's fine, Daniel. I think she moved it and it just spewed, right? So she's perfectly fine. She's perfectly safe. Just a lot of ginger. So as you can imagine, it's I think it would have been alcoholic by now. And it wasn't alcoholic when I bought it, but I think it became alcoholic as it just sat there. So yeah, but I wouldn't trust universities or schools when it comes to critical thinking. Um, Mainly because when you actually listen to how many professors now at university qualify or quantify what critical thinking is, they'll describe it as being critical of the work and of the author. And I'm not joking. There was a survey that was done in 2024 where they spoke to something like 1,500 university professors, and they asked them, what do you see as critical thinking? And over 80% of them responded it is to be critical of the writing and of the author. That's what critical thinking is according to them. Which of course that isn't what critical thinking is. Critical thinking is to read something cognizant of your own biases and also keeping in mind that the author has biases as well. So you are being hypercritical of your own biases whilst reading or whilst listening or, any of that stuff. Can I have the recipe, please? Wait, which recipe, Corin? What happened to separating art from artist? Antari, so if you're part of the postmodernist, post-truth movement, they don't believe that art can be separated from the artist, right? They don't believe that that is something that is possible. All things is an extension of the self, and the self is never changing. And so, yeah, that won't work. It's something that conservatives oftentimes believe, and you kind of have to, because I mean, you have someone like H.P. Lovecraft, who is a phenomenal novelist, and I've read a number of his books, and I'm in love with H.P. Lovecraft's universe in general. But the man was a raging racist. Whoa boy, when we're talking racist, we mean like business racist. This man genuinely believed that black people aren't human, and big fan of eugenics and all the rest of it. So you kind of go, okay, your books, really good. Your views and you as a person, not that great. So I'm going to enjoy your books because you're dead now. It doesn't even matter. But I'll steer clear of your views. Most people nowadays can't do that anymore. Art is becoming really abstract because of subjective relativism. True, bit of a racist. That cat had an interesting name. Yeah, Grandful. I say bit of a racist. It is an understatement. The bit part is an understatement. The man was basically he was basically on par with someone like Hitler. The man was crazy, but a very good author at the same time. So is what it is. All right, ladies and gentlemen, final questions. If you guys have any other questions that you wanted to ask me, please ask. Otherwise, I'm going to quickly go record a video for Truth Social. Not Truth Social, Truth Report. And then I'm going to I think I actually have to record a video for the channel as well. 'Cause idolizing of people are becoming more cultish than ever. So what if you're more caring of your own race? So Christine, in this interest, so I don't mind if people are more caring about their own race and you only care about the people of your race. I don't view that as racist, right? Because you're welcome to. You're very welcome to care about people only of your own race. There's nothing wrong with that. But there is a big difference between caring about your own race and actively wanting to hurt or harm other races. That's a huge difference, right? So I would actually make the argument here. I don't view nationalists or even ultra nationalists as racists. You know, if you're someone that believes South Africa should be, or there should be a white only state and there should be no one else that lives there, that's fine. You're allowed to do that, right? There's nothing wrong with that. Provided that your argument isn't that we should kill everyone else until there's only white people left. That's where I have a problem with it. And that's where I think it becomes racist. So, yeah, I don't mind that. But H.P. Lovecraft wasn't just the guy that said he only cared about white people. He very much wanted to do some strange things to black people as well. This is off topic, but what about that law that is about Afrikaans independence? Sorry, I really don't know much about it. I just heard of it somewhere and I want to know more. So it's part of the Constitution, and it was originally sort of included in the Constitution at the behest of the National Party, but this was also done to appease a lot of the more, I guess you could say, reluctant Afrikaners, because there were a lot of Afrikaners that really didn't want the new South Africa. And so this was established to say that there must be in the Constitution the ability for Afrikaners to negotiate their own sovereign state, an Afrikaner homeland, if you will. That Afrikaners must have the right to be able to negotiate that. It is part of our constitution, and the ANC actually promised that once they get to power, they will allow for that conversation to happen. It's been 30 years, and the ANC now effectively wants to pretend like that doesn't exist. So, yeah, I don't know what's going to happen there. But, you know, maybe we will have that conversation at some point. I genuinely don't know. I genuinely can't tell you. CR, how you doing? So, yeah, it's going to be, there's a lot of interesting things lying ahead for this country. And I think President Trump's plans for South Africa, if nothing else, it's going to be very interesting to watch how the ANC maneuvers around this versus how the Americans maneuver. And it's also one of the things that I want to look at and what I want to see is whether or not there's still some intelligence within the ANC, because this is going to prove it. The ANC's reaction to this game that they're about to enter into with President Trump is going to determine whether or not there is still any intellectual power left within the ANC. Are they capable of negotiating an advantageous deal with the Americans? I don't think so. It seems like the ANC's approach is to hope and dream that China can replace America in the South African economy. It appears like from the ANC's perspective, it's just hopes and dreams, right? If we lose America, we'll figure it out some other way. Not realizing that we still haven't replaced the losses of America. Even with all of the new trade negotiations that, you know, John Steenhuisen and Cyril Ramaphosa and all of them have been through, we still have not made up for the things that we've lost with the Americans. So, yeah, it's going to be super interesting. What's left of it? Hey, Stefan. Brian, how you doing? Sir, you served in the SADF, not the SNODF. What we saw is coming again. It's time to react. I would argue, Christine, be careful. Be careful, be patient. There's no reason for people to react until it is absolutely required. There's still a lot of things that needs to happen and that can happen, and there's still a lot of things to be excited about. Nadine, I will definitely check that out. It's about him and AI. What Jody Rose says about him and AI. I'll go check it out, Nadine. And to be fair, just to correct you, because semantically it's important, I don't like H.P. Lovecraft. I like H.P. Lovecraft's novels. There is a difference. What percentage would you say of the US Democrats are genuinely ignorant of what Trump is doing versus knowing and trying to undermine it? Gigi, I think that there is a not insignificant amount of senators and congressmen in the Democratic Party that are just completely ignorant. They genuinely don't know. They genuinely don't know. Right? They just have no idea. And I think the bigger problem, and for good reason, they're not the smartest people in the world. They're not people that they are as well career politicians, right? People who have never built anything, never done anything, they don't know anything. But there is a subset of senators and congressmen within the US. Um, People like Omar and people like AOC. These congressmen and senators know exactly what Trump is trying to do. And they also understand that should Trump be successful, it destroys a lot of the plans that they have laid out for themselves. I am, for example, convinced that Ilhan Omar is in America to destroy America. She is a Muslim plant meant to bring America to its knees and enable the Islamic takeover of America. That is why she's there. That is what she works for 24/7. That is her main goal. And so I think she knows what Trump is up to. She understands what Trump is up to. She's just powerless at the moment to stop it. So she's trying her best to undermine it. AOC probably doesn't care so much about the Islamic connection, but she's certainly a communist, right? And so from her perspective, if she has to choose between President Trump and President Xi Jinping, she is going to choose Xi Jinping every single time because communism, right? So I think your more hardline communist leftist Democrats, they know what Trump is doing and they're desperately trying to put a stop to it. Your older sort of Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer types, I don't think they have a clue. They just don't get it. Like nothing makes sense to them. From their perspective, it's like whatever, you know. They can't put two and two together because they've never existed in the real world, so they don't understand half of this stuff. And Christine, just to this has nothing to do. I didn't assume you were male or female. Like I don't quite know either or. So from my perspective, and I should just make this clear to everyone here, I don't know what any of you are, right? Whether you're male or female. I just sort of treat everyone equally. But Christine, my Christine, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name then, but from my perspective, I'm not telling you not to act because I think you're a woman or any of that. I'm telling you not to act because I don't think it's the right time to do anything. Like I recognize that you may have you have spent time in the trusts, you've seen what that is, you were in the defense force and all that. I appreciate that. But I don't think it's the right time to act. I think if people started acting now, you would find yourself severely outnumbered. And you would find that the majority of people are not yet at the point where they will join. It needs to go a lot worse in this country before the majority of South Africans would actually go, enough now. This is enough. I don't want to deal with this anymore. So yeah, I personally think I think be patient. Patience is a virtue in this country. It's so sad, man. We had all the experts that created everything pre 1994. We need to get rid of the ANC. We were world leaders in almost everything. We were outnumbered 5,000 to 50,000 in Angola. Yes, but you were also a lot better armed. And you had the backing of the government at that time. And you had the training. You're not dealing with all those people that are super trained or super armed. So I would still say be patient. There's no reason to act until it is absolutely required. And I would argue that when and if the moment to act arrives, it'll be painfully obvious to everyone. You will see an organic reaction from everyone just immediately. And then it'll just happen. There's no need for us to start hastening because people need to understand that should that actions ever take place, and of course I pray that it never happens, but if we were to enter into a civil war scenario here in South Africa, that's not going to be good, right? Our women and our children are going to be the ones suffering as a result of this. So as long as we can stave that off, as long as that isn't necessary, I would say we should go with plan B pretty much every single time. And we should leave that option as like, that's the last ditch one. That's the one that you go to when no other options are present anymore. But until that time, let's focus on the things that we can fix. And let's also keep in mind that this country isn't static. Things could change, right? People could wake up tomorrow and realize just how bad the ANC has screwed things up and maybe ask for someone new. So all of that can absolutely happen. I wouldn't be so quick to just dismiss and say, well, we need a final solution. Although I do understand that there's some who do believe that. Who are Christians, have been brainwashed to hate Christianity, Christian values. So, Elon, I personally don't believe that you can be Democrat and Christian. So there's a couple of things. There's few things in my life that I am sort of hardline convinced by. I'm not one to render judgment on the state of someone's salvation because I don't believe that that judgment belongs to me. I believe that that judgment is God and God's alone. But if you're a Christian and a Democrat, there are serious questions that I need you to be able to answer. And you need to be able to explain to me how you can justify some of the things that the Democrats stand for. So, for example, the Democrats are for gay marriage 100%. That's a serious problem for a Christian, right? Marriage is between a man and a woman. Marriage is ordained perfectly by God and God alone. It is literally one of two things that God calls holy in the Bible. God is holy and marriage is holy. Right? Those are the two things that's called holy in the Bible. God and marriage. So marriage is very important to God. If you're okay with gay marriage, there's some questions that needs to be answered right there. But that's a tiny one. If you're okay with the trans movement, now we have even bigger questions, right? We have much bigger questions now. Especially if you're okay with trans people or trans ideology being pushed onto children. Now we have serious questions. Then we get to the question of abortion. Now, I believe that if you could somehow stomach your way through the gay marriage problem and the transsexual problem, once you reach the abortion problem, there is no way that a Christian can look at the abortion problem and find a justification for it. Zero. Cannot happen. Abortion is evil. End of discussion. Abortion is murder. If you're a Christian, that is the only thing that you can believe. There is no gray areas here. There is no arguments that you can make for or against it. Abortion is murder. Stop. Final. That is why I have said, and I will continue to say, that doctors who perform abortion should get the death penalty, because you are a mass murderer if you perform abortions. And very specifically, if a woman is caught before having an abortion, she should be locked up in jail for 20 years because she was attempting to commit murder. Right? And if she actually did commit that murder, she should be tried for murder. And before anyone tells me my body, my choice, you did have a choice. You chose to have sex. That was your body. That was your choice. Your choice does not extend then to end the life that comes as a result of your own choice. End of discussion. If you want to come to me and say, well, I agree with the Democrats and their positions, and I'm a Christian, I have serious questions. Pay for it, you pay for it. I don't know where we've started going down this road of women claiming my body, my choice, and yet no one asks the question, who's removed your choice? You still have all the choices in the world. What we're saying is after you've made the choice, you cannot then say, well, I don't want to deal with the consequences of my choice. Because the pregnancy isn't the choice. The sex was the choice. The pregnancy is the consequence of the choice, and that's now a life. Right? And I would venture to say, I would personally prefer if people don't have sex before marriage. Right? I'm 41 years old. I'm not having sex before marriage, although I am not a virgin. Sadly, I spent most of my life not as a Christian. Right? So I made a lot of mistakes in my life. But since becoming a Christian and accepting Jesus Christ, I don't have sex because I'm not married. Now, if I can do that at the age of 41, I'm sure everyone can actually do that. It's not that difficult. You just don't have sex, and then you don't have to worry about what comes after. And if you really want to have sex, get married. But if you have a boyfriend or girlfriend and you really need to do it, get married, and then you can have sex as much as you want. But you cannot say that I want to have sex as much as I want, and I want to be able to kill the babies that come as a result of that. And if you're going to have sex outside of marriage, because I realize not everyone is a Christian, so you can do whatever the hell you want, right? If you're not a Christian, by the way, these rules technically don't apply to you. Not the abortion one, that does apply to you because that is a life. You don't get to kill people just because you don't believe that it's wrong. That's still murder. But I will say this. If you're not a Christian, you are allowed to have sex as much as you want, right? Because the rules only apply to those of us that follow Christ, because we have the Holy Spirit to help us follow the rules. So you can have sex as much as you want, if you want to, right? But if you're getting pregnant in the 21st century, what the hell are you doing? You have the pill that you can be on, and you can ensure if you're a woman that you won't get pregnant. You have condoms. You have his and hers condoms if you need it. There are so many ways in which you can ensure that you don't get pregnant that there is no way that you can tell me it was an accident. It wasn't an accident. You were being careless. And now you want to kill the baby that has come as a result of that carelessness. And you don't get to do that. That child was a gift from God. That child is meant for you. I am 38 and never had an accident, not once. Good for you, CR. Good for you. People now are too used to crying their way out of the consequences. People have become weak. True. Very, very true. Yeah, I don't know. I think there's some. I think our world has just lost its way. if I'm quite honest with you guys, I think we've lost our way in so many different ways. I like there's so many things that makes no sense once you start to think about it. I'll give you guys this, and then I'm gonna go. Um, One of the things that truly baffles my mind. If I can ask you guys this, what is the bog standard? How long should you date? Say you just met someone, a really great guy, great girl. How long should you guys date for? Like, what's the minimum? Let me say this. How long should you date someone before you decide, you know, you need to get married? Okay, you say 2 years, 3 years, okay. Anyone else want to venture a guess? 3 to 4 years, okay, 3 years, all right. You know when you know. Okay, about three, yeah. Okay, so most of you between 2 and 3 years. Most of you would say a minimum at least 3 years, 2 years, right? At least 2 years, and then you can move on. Okay. So now let's say you have dated for 2 years. Do you guys believe that you should first live together before you get married, or do you think after 2 years of dating you can get married and you don't need to worry about living together? Just once you've dated for about a year or so, do you need to? Is it important to live together before you get married? Let me ask that. One's married. Is it? No, 6 months living together and married at about 30. So I'm going to give you guys some statistics, and I'm not the one who came up with these statistics. I didn't do the research. I mean, Louise Perry actually quoted all of this in her book. Phenomenal book, by the way. So everything you guys just said, we only started doing about 30 years ago. Everything that you guys just said, right? Date for a minimum of 2 years, live together for about 6 months, maybe a year, and then you get married. We started doing that around 30, maybe 40 years ago, is when we started doing all of that. Prior to that, couples on average would know each other maybe 6 months, and then they would get married. 6 months. In fact, dating was not really that big of a deal prior to the sexual revolution. So now we're going back a little bit further, right? We're going back to 1960s, 1970s. Prior to the sexual revolution, dating isn't a big deal. We don't really date. We meet usually with male companions. So a woman couldn't just meet a man and go out alone. The father or the brother would have to join to make sure that she's safe and that the man, and then a few months later, they would get married. So let's go back to the sexual revolution. Let's say about 60 years ago, we make a change and we say, no, that's crazy. It's crazy. You can't do that. You have to know the person, and you have to get to know the person. You only get to know the person after 2 years, maybe a year, maybe at the best a year. And then you have to live together, because you first have to figure out if you actually do like living together before you can actually live together, So all of this stuff needs to be done. Now let's talk statistics. Statistically speaking, couples who have sex before marriage are 3 times more likely to get divorced than couples who do not have sex before marriage. That's statistics. So just looking at divorce rates and marriage rates, couples who have sex before marriage are 3 times more likely to get divorced. In fact, of all couples that have sex, around 70% of them end in divorce. Couples who engage in sex before marriage. About 70% of them end in divorce. Couples who live together prior to getting married, 70% of them end in divorce. Couples who don't live together before they get married, only 20% of those end in divorce. Only 20%. So 20% of marriages end in divorce for couples who don't live together before marriage. 70% end in divorce for those who do live together before marriage. And as it turns out, it's the sex that does it. It's not really the living together, it's the sex that does it. Because even couples who don't live together but do actively engage in sex, it remains 70%. So sex before marriage, huge indicator that you will not stay married. You and your wife will get divorced at least 70% of the time. You will get divorced as a result of sex before marriage. And then more importantly, they find that couples that get married sooner, and now this actually, they did some studies inside churches and church communities, because most churches do not actually look favorably upon dating. So this might come as a shock to a lot of people. But in my church, for example, dating is not really encouraged. So if you are dating and if there's no other options, so for example, I have friends who have been dating for almost 3 years now. They just got engaged a month ago. But the reason they've been dating for so long is she's still at university, and her father forbade her from getting married to her boyfriend until she finishes university. So he had to stick around. He had no choice. The father would not give his blessing, and so he had to honor her father, and so they couldn't get married. So they just had to stick it out, right? So that's happened. And I know of another couple in my church that's also been dating for almost 2 years, but that's the same thing. Her father doesn't really like the guy, and so her father has said that she must first finish her degree before she's allowed to get married. But in general, my church looks at dating as a waste of time. Because as a Christian, you believe that love is a choice more so than just a feeling. That feeling goes away pretty quickly, right? The feeling of love and butterflies, that goes away pretty quickly. You meet someone and you have to make determinations. Can I see myself living my life with this person? Can I see myself building a life with this person? Do they have the personality traits that I can see raising my children, right? From a wife's perspective, is this the kind of man that I can trust, that he will take care of me, that he will take care of my kids, that he will save us in case of emergency? Are these things present? If yes, make the choice and go, right? So my church, not big on dating. And what they find is most religious couples, so couples that are Christian, never get divorced. So the divorce rate amongst not just nominal Christians, but actual professing Christians is very low. Most of them are happily married. And most churches would have a similar view on dating. Not all, there's obviously huge arrays, but most churches would have a similar view. The problem here would be, and this is why dating is dangerous, because let's be real, when you're dating a guy or a girl, you're obviously dating them because you find them attractive, right? Obvious. The more you hang out with this person, the more you have to fight your urges and deny yourself. The harder it's going to get. And eventually you're going to be tempted into sin. You're going to be tempted to have sex before marriage. And so the argument is, once you've seen what you need to see, and it doesn't take that long. It does not take that long. You will know what often happens. And look, I'm going to say this, and a lot of you are going to tell me, if you're being honest with yourself, you're absolutely correct. You know, within the first month, whether this is the person you want to marry or whether this is just the person you want to date. You know it. Within the first month, you've already seen things that you're not quite... You like them. Maybe they're very sexy. They have a six-pack or she has big boobies. And you really like that. But you also know that there's some things that really annoy you about this person, right? You stick with it because you're hoping that those things might change. But you know that as it stands right now, you don't quite like these things very much. So that's proof that you don't need 2 years or 3 years to figure that out. You need a month. And then at the end of that month, you need to ask yourself some questions. Is this person the right person for me, provided that there are some things that I need to accept about them? I need to accept that she annoys me sometimes with some questions. Is that something that I can accept? Is that something that I can make work for myself? Because this is the other thing that I will just give some advice on. Never get married, and this is not even me giving advice for myself, although this is stuff that I've experienced. Never get married or start dating someone based on what you hope they will become. Marry someone or date someone on who they are now. Because what you hope they might become is a might. It's not something that you can ever know. They might never become that thing that you were hoping for. So if you're already seeing in the first month that there are things you don't like, leave. You're wasting everyone's time. Especially if this isn't stuff that you could live with. If it is stuff you can live with, great for that. Right? Go right ahead and live your life and be happy with it. And yeah, obviously no one is. This was a big thing for me, Marco, that I kind of had to deal with. And I had some incredible conversations with my pastor. I have a phenomenal pastor. But these are conversations that I had with my pastor, because I was like, "Look, I'm sorry, but there's just some things that that I can't deal with." And my pastor said the following to me, and this made a big impact on me. He said to me, "One thing that you must accept right now is that whoever you marry, no matter how perfect she may seem at the time, you're going to learn things about her that is going to disappoint you very deeply." And he means you're going to be very disappointed once you learn those things. There's going to be things about her that you learn and you're going to be like, if I knew this, I probably would not have married you. Because people are people and we're imperfect, and we have crazy things. But that's where that love part comes in, right? That's where love is a choice. So that's where you make the decision to love them because you promised that you would. And you have to deal with that. You have to accept it. So yeah, trying to find the perfect person, that doesn't exist. You're going to be looking forever, because everyone everywhere is at some point going to disappoint you. And my father had some advice for me as well. If you don't speak Afrikaans, I seriously and genuinely apologize for this, because this can only really be said in Afrikaans. But I remember we were once driving, and as we parked at the robot, there's this girl that was walking. She was crossing the street, and she was genuinely beautiful. And I said to my dad, "Wow, hy is seker die mooiste meisie wat ek in my hele lewe nog gesien het." And my dad turned to me and he said, "Stefan, onthou net een ding. Ergens in hierdie wêreld is daar 'n ou wat siek en sat is vir haar kak." And that has stuck with me my entire life. Every single time I see a really beautiful girl, I'm reminded of that. Somewhere in this world, there is a guy that is fed up with her bullshit. That just, to me, was just the funniest thing ever. You make a promise in front of the Lord as a child of divorce. I won't do that to my children and get a divorce. Francha, I'm a child of divorce as well, so I know exactly what you're talking about. I was attracted, and those things, those same things that attracted you can drive you up the wall in a few years. Very true. Was together 7 years till his ma set him up with a homewrecker, his stalker. Then she begged me to get him back when she turned him versus mine, married. Wait, took him to UK, saved him twice, his friend. I'm the pariah now. Oh, Karen, I'm really sorry to hear that. Really sorry to hear that. But yeah, I would say like there's a reason why the Bible allows you to get a divorce after cheating. If you can forgive and if they genuinely repent, then absolutely try to make that marriage work. But what I have seen from most people who cheat, I see very few people changing. This has been something that I've had so many friends and specifically girlfriends who's gone through this. She dates this guy, she loves him, but he keeps cheating. And no matter how much he promises, he will always do it again. Right? So yeah, I would argue don't waste your time. If a guy steps out on you, if a guy cheats on you, pack your bags and go. If a girl cheats on you, pack your bags and go. The only time you can take them back is if they have genuinely repented, and that you have to determine that for yourself, right? You have to look at their heart, you look at their fruits, and then if you can forgive them, go for it because divorce really isn't good. Um, you think apart from a few edge cases, cheating is a choice, and that choice comes from somewhere. Partner, cheating is absolutely a choice. It is absolutely a choice. No one just accidentally fouls on top of someone else, right? Cheating comes with preamble. You have to open yourself up to this. I can tell you this. The difference that I see between Christian girls and girls in the world is insane. So it's at the point now where I can tell you whether or not a girl is a Christian within 5 minutes of meeting her, even without us ever talking about faith. The difference is stark. Christian girls aren't available. Ever. They're not available. And very specifically, and I'll say this as a guy, I have known women who are married where I have conversations with them and I realize if I really push the right buttons, that ring will disappear. Like, I know. I just need to push the right buttons. I need to make the right conversation, drive the conversation in the right place, and that ring will go away. That is impossible with a Christian woman. Impossible. They are not available, especially once they're married. It's one of the most beautiful things that I can, like, I don't think you guys understand how beautiful that is to me. Not because she's beautiful, right? But that level of commitment to her husband is beautiful to me. There's women in our church who are married, and you look at how they interact with the people around them. You realize immediately there's no avenue of engagement here. No matter what angle you take, you will not get an opportunity. It will just not be provided to you. And then you meet girls who stand firmly in the world, and the ring is effectively just an obstacle. It's not an immovable object. It's an obstacle that you can maybe get around. You just need to approach things correctly. And I wish I could tell girls who are not Christian. I wish I could tell girls who are not Christian. If you want a guy to basically move heaven and earth for you, become like the Christian girl. Even if you're not, following faith or whatever, if you're still in your journey and you have not yet accepted Jesus Christ, mimic that. Because there is nothing in this world more attractive to a guy than a girl who isn't free. And if you want to get rid of most of the bullshitters, like if you're a girl and you want to get rid of like 90% of all the playboys, stop selling yourself for free. You will find that only the good guys approach you. The guys actually worthy of staying. But okay, I'm gonna leave now. Cell phone without a battery is useless. A guitar without strings is useless. Life without God is useless. True, my baker. True. I agree with you. And I would love to see every single one of you come to faith. And I would love to see every single one of you find Christ. And if you do live in the Cape Town area and you need advice on what church to join, maybe you have a Sunday open and you would like to come to my church, you can email me or DM me on X or DM me on Discord. For the gamers among you that have Discord, my link should be in the description down below. DM me and I will tell you which church I go to. I don't discuss my church publicly, and there's reasons for that. I don't have the permission of the members in my church to put their lives potentially out there on the internet. It is a place of worship. It is a place where families come, and you have some crazy people on the internet that might want to do stuff, right? So I haven't asked permission to speak publicly on what church I attend, and so I won't do that. Is there no Discord link? Wow, that's interesting. I can't even remember when I removed the Discord link. Did I remove? Why would I remove the Discord link? I'll quickly get one for you. Mm. Yeah, we could probably do that. That should be good. All right, I'll quickly give you guys a link to this. Yeah, you guys can click that link if you want to contact me on X on Discord. You're more than welcome to, and I would happily have conversations with you about which church I go to, but I won't be doing that in open conversation. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, and yes, you can DM me. So the Discord server is there. It does exist. People are allowed to use it. I just don't really use the server all that much. It's for where people want to chat to each other. But you can DM me. My name is in there. And yeah, I'd be happy to talk to you. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, that is it from me. I really appreciate all of you for coming out, for hanging out. Those of you that gifted money, donated, super chats, membership, really appreciate all of you. You guys are absolutely phenomenal. Thank you so much. And as always, I will see all of you in the next one. Peace.